Pandemics and epidemics have been a feature of life since the very dawn of humankind. And of course, their impact can be devastating. For individuals that die, it's obviously tragic. But the effects of severe disease outbreaks can also shatter societies and even change the course of history. Read on to find out about 20 of the worst epidemics that people have faced over the centuries. Staggeringly, 500 million people around the world are estimated to have come down with Spanish flu, with some 50 to 100 million dying. The infection got underway in 1918 during the final months of World War I. Strangely, it's almost certainly the case that the disease didn't start in Spain. The Spanish label came from the fact that under wartime conditions, other countries were censoring their news outlets. But neutral Spain's press was free to report it first, giving the country the unenviable but erroneous title of originators. The first U.S. case was reported at Fort Riley in Kansas, where the unfortunate Private Albert Gitchell fell ill with the virus on the morning of March 4, 1918. By the afternoon, around 100 of his comrades were complaining of symptoms including headache, high temperature and aching throat. The disease spread across the country with alarming speed, taking the lives of around 675,000 Americans. And U.S. soldiers traveling to the front in Western Europe took the infection with them. The Black Death, or the bubonic plague as it's also known, has perhaps struck more into the hearts of humans than any other disease in history. It's believed that the plague originated in Asia and then made its way to Europe, where it caused widespread devastation. This outbreak that started in 1346 was one of many that struck countries all around Europe in the following centuries. The plague was spread by black rats which carried the fleas harboring a bacterium named Yersinia pestis. Researchers believe that more than half of Europe's population was wiped out by the Black Death, with potentially as many as 50 million deaths. It's also said that the resulting shortage of labor increased wages and also began a social revolution that brought serfdom to an end. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, which destroys cells within the body that normally repel infections. After a time, the virus so weakens a body's defenses that the sufferer will fall prey to AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. This is a disease that's frequently fatal if left untreated. In the early days after HIV appeared, there was no treatment for the illness. Thankfully, today it can be successfully held at bay with drugs. Around the world, AIDS has been the cause of some 35 million deaths. Scientists believe that the disease probably came from West African chimpanzees. They carried a version of the virus which mutated and jumped the species barrier as early as the 1920s. Although 40 million people are today living with the disease, the best news about AIDS is that 2 people have been cured of the disease, one in 2011 and the other in 2020. The ravages of human illness are nothing new, and compelling evidence for this comes from an ancient Chinese village dating back some 5,000 years. The archaeological site, which is known as Haminmanga today, is in China's northeast. Researchers uncovered 27 house foundations in 2011. And what they found in the remains of one of those houses was deeply shocking. The researchers uncovered the jumbled skeletons of around 100 people in a chaotic mass grave measuring just 210 square feet. A team of anthropologists at Jilin University in the Chinese city of Chongqing analyzed the 5,000-year-old human remains. They concluded that the bodies had probably been hurriedly disposed of because of an outbreak of a highly infectious and deadly disease. The researchers theorized that the epidemic had killed so swiftly that proper funerals were impossible. Poliomyelitis, to give the disease its full name, is a viral infection which most usually attacks children of 5 or under. The majority of polio cases are asymptomatic, so that the person contracting it may never even know they've had it. But according to the World Health Organization, for every 200 people afflicted by the virus, one will suffer paralysis. Of those people, as many as 1 in 10 will die. The U.S. was hit by a polio outbreak in 1916. It started in New York City and spread around the nation. Some 27,000 infections were reported, with around 6,000 of those ending in death. Thankfully, experts developed an effective and safe vaccine in 1954. Since then, the prevalence of the disease worldwide has decreased by 99%. In 2018, just 33 cases were reported from all over the world, and there have been no cases in the U.S. since 1979. To get a feel of this terrible epidemic that exploded in Athens some 2,500 years ago, we need look no further than the words of Thucydides. In 2017, a translation of the ancient Greek historian's work appeared in The History of the Peloponnesian War by Richard Crawley. Here, we can see as Thucydides describes the disease. He records that people in good health were all of a sudden attacked by violent heats in the head, and redness and inflammation in the eyes, the inward parts, such as the throat or tongue, becoming bloody and emitting an unnatural and fetid breath. Today, it's difficult to be sure what exactly this horrible affliction actually was, but as many as 100,000 may have died. Experts have speculated that the illness might have been anything from typhoid to Ebola. A Spartan army had Athens under siege at the time, and this may have led to overcrowding within the city walls. This could well have worsened the epidemic, researchers believe. As seems to happen all too often with epidemics, there was a war underway when this outbreak of bubonic plague hit Russia in 1770. The conflict was the Russo-Turkish War, which had started in 1768. The first diagnosed cases were among Russian soldiers stationed in the contested land of Moldova on the Russian Empire's western fringes. The plague soon spread through Russia, hitting the capital Moscow with particular ferocity. Although the city had quarantine contingency plans designed to combat just such outbreaks, the measures weren't activated quickly enough and the plague soon gripped Moscow. Eventually discontented citizens rioted. 3 days of violence resulted in many thousands of deaths, adding to the estimated 100,000 Russians killed by the disease. In the Aztec language, the word Cocalizale means pest, and this epidemic was certainly violently pestilent. This epidemic is believed to have killed in the region of 15 million people in the 3 years that it raged from 1545. The disease was especially devastating since a serious drought had already exhausted the Aztec people. So, what was it that took this almost unimaginably huge toll on the Aztec people almost 4 centuries ago? In fact, we do have a likely answer thanks to the modern science of DNA analysis. Studies of genetic material from some of the long-dead Aztecs uncovered evidence of a type of salmonella. This particular strain of the bacteria causes deadly enteric fever. One of the types of enteric fever that afflicts humans is typhoid, often fatal in the days before antibiotic treatment was available. In the year 1793, Philadelphia was the temporary capital of the U.S. However, that distinction did nothing to curtail the dreadful yellow fever epidemic that struck the city. The illness came during the exceptionally hot summer of 1793. Those who could, largely the wealthier sections of the population, fled the city altogether. Many of those left behind were African Americans. Thomas Jefferson, then Secretary of State and later to become president in 1801, wrote in a letter, "It is called a yellow fever, but is like nothing known or read of by the physicians. In fact, the disease is spread by mosquitoes and today a vaccine protects against it." Symptoms included a yellowing of the skin, high temperatures and stomach disorders. Many of those afflicted didn't recover and the death toll reached as high as 5,000. The colder weather of the winter brought an end to the epidemic. Some 1,500 years ago, a lethal epidemic erupted in the Byzantine Empire, which was effectively the eastern half of what had previously been the Roman Empire. As with so many times and in so many places over the centuries, the disease was the bubonic plague. This was carried by its deadly vector, the black rat, and its parasitic fleas.